Hello there YouTube, this is Father Duke 9000, and today we're going to be addressing a pretty controversial topic: video game adaptations. Ever since the days of the live-action Super Mario Bros. Movie, and even a bit before that, video game adaptations have had a large stigma similar to that given to movie-time games. Be it the inability for the makers to give a crap about what they're doing, a lack of time and budget, or even just the fact that people kept complaining about something being changed until everyone thought the whole thing had to be awful because of that, for years and to this very day, video game adaptations have had an infamous reputation in the gaming community, in particular today's subject, video game cartoons. In the late 80s and early 90s, video games were still seen as stuff entirely for kids, regardless of whether or not that was actually true. And as such, many companies wanted to make animated adaptations to market their games for a wider audience. There were many studios who have taken up the task over the years, with varying degrees of success, but out of all of them, there was a particular French studio that stepped up to the bat and produced several video game cartoons. And the studio was DiC Entertainment, who went on to make many cartoons with varying degrees of success. And the one area they tackled almost as much as Nintendo was the, at the time, insanely popular Sonic the Hedgehog franchise, producing 3 cartoons over the space of 5 years. Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog, an enjoyably insane mashup of Sonic, old Wile E. Coyote cartoons, and Ren and Stimpy; Sonic Underground, a much-reviled alternate universe that made a lot of oddball decisions, least of which involved Sonic and his new siblings forming a rock band and singing hilariously cheesy songs in the middle of every episode; and today's subject, Sonic the Hedgehog SatAM, nicknamed after it airing on Saturday mornings. Airing from 1993 till 1994 over the span of 2 seasons, Sonic SatAM attempted to adapt the Sega Mega Drive games in a very different style from its Adventures counterpart, and indeed every other DiC video game cartoon, by turning a very lighthearted and whimsical plot and setting into something much darker and edgier, adding a creative team that actually cared about the quality of whatever they were doing, being far more developed than the other DiC cartoons, and bothering to make a plot out of at-the-time plotless games. SatAM has gained an incredibly huge cult following, even getting a number of well-known fan sites that are still active to this very day. As a longtime Sonic fan, I've always wondered how SatAM would hold up since it first aired, and so, on its 20th anniversary, let's juice and jam into the review for Sonic the Hedgehog SatAM.
Just a humble bounty hunter, man.
On the planet of Mobius, an evil dictator known as Dr. Robotnik has set about to conquer the world, taking over the national capital of Mobotropolis, turning the environment into a polluted wasteland, and roboticizing each and every person he finds and captures into a mindless robotic servant. As each day passes with the help of a massive army of SWAT bots and his somewhat loyal assistant Snively, the round warlord comes closer to accomplishing his goal of taking over the entire planet. However, there is one thing standing in the way of this. In the great forest of Knothole, there lies a small resistance movement of teenage animals known as the Freedom Fighters. Co-captained by the fastest as well as cockiest thing alive, Sonic the Hedgehog, and the strategic but occasionally bull-headed chipmunk squirrel Sally Acorn, this team of young Mobians take the idea of guerrilla warfare as far as they can go, with constant raids of factories, stealing vital information, and doing all they can to stop the dictator from taking over more of Mobius. Will this band of colorful characters really be able to defeat the madman and take back the home they lost so long ago, or will they just end up as another fraction of the man's enormous robotic army? When it comes to the animation, DiC's video gaming cartoons usually get the short end of the stick when it comes to animation quality, especially shows like the Super Mario Bros. Super Show trilogy, and particularly the abominable eye-gouging fest that is the 3rd season of Captain N, the Game Master. However, the animation for Sonic SatAM is not only miles ahead in quality of all those other adaptations, but it's also damn good in its own right. The company that took care of the animation was SatAM, a Korean animation company involved in several projects and known for doing some pretty damn good work, especially with shows like Gargoyles, Scooby-Doo Mystery Incorporated, and Adventure Time, something which definitely explains a lot here. While there are one or two moments where things go off model, and believe me, they are noticeable.
Just kidding, Sal. Kiss wasn't that great.
Oh, really?
Really?
In Season 2 overall doesn't look as good as the first, the general animation quality is actually pretty damn good. There's a great attention to detail, barely any expense is spent on making things look as good as they possibly can, and the characters move about like they're actually alive as compared to the robotic characters seen in other DiC adaptations. And while I'm not a big fan of the whole big-headed human-like body designs for the female characters, the overall character designs for the show are also pretty good, with this show's design for Sonic being my favorite Western-made rendition of the Blue Blur so far. If there's one thing definitely in the show's favor, it's having an all-star cast of industry veterans coming together to voice our heroes and villains. Going off of just the main cast, we've got Jaleel White as the Blue Blur himself, Kath Soucie as Sally, Jim Cummings as Dr. Robotnik, Charlie Adler as Snively, Christine Covino as the half-roboticized Bunny Rabot, and even the great Rob Paulson as lovable French coward Antoine. And they, along with the rest of the cast, all do a great job delivering lines, with particular credit going to Cummings' distinctly creepy voice for the round dictator.
Any final words for your subjects, sire?
You can't win this, Julian.
The name is no longer Julian. From this day forward, I am Robotnik.
And Paulson for giving what is the most stereotypical French accent in all the land of sense of fun that makes it really enjoyable to listen to.
Oh, we again.
And?
Butter? Oui. Oh, yes, oui. Butter.
Margarine!
Margarine! You would cook escargot with margarine. Oh, but no! It will be too cruel, you fuel! Okay, I give. Uncle, I will tell you everything!
Something that's not so good, however, is the musical score, which does three things that, in my opinion, are the three sins of background music. Number one, it doesn't fit in with whatever's going on 95% of the time. Number two, they aren't very memorable, with the only exception being the Fastest Thing Alive theme tune. And number three, most of it aren't fun to listen to on their own. Now, this is mostly based from my own musical taste, but it's particularly annoying in this case given that Sonic the Hedgehog is a franchise renowned for awesome music, despite the quality of the actual games or adaptations, so for one of them to not actually have any good music is really bothersome. Unlike many other video gaming cartoons which basically served as mindlessly bonkers advertisements of their franchises with barely any thought or effort put into them, Sonic SatAM actually tried to go above that and be something that could not only stand on its own without any kind of comparison to the games, which helps given the hair-thin connection to the Mega Drive classics, but also something that was genuinely enjoyable in its own right. And I'm happy to say here that for the most part, that's accomplished very well. The characters on both the good side and the evil side are actually pretty memorable and use typical personality tropes in a way that it doesn't feel cliched, with particular credit going to Snively, who in the second season turns into a passive-aggressive, bitter servant who constantly insults Robotnik behind his back.
Perhaps they'll find my little surprise.
Your stupidity will ruin everything, you ugly boy.
What? Was that Snively?
I said the Doomsday Machine's going to need more oil, sir.
And Antoine, whom normally acts as your stereotypical cheese-eating surrender monkey, but at the core is revealed to be a bit of an incompetent freedom fighter with a good heart. And while the vast majority of the series is about as faithful to its source material as Dragon Ball Evolution is, I do really admire that they still managed to carry the environmental ace-up of the Mega Drive games through into the cartoon, unlike most adaptations that generally forget about the more subtle aspects of their source material. The world and setting of SatAM are also unique in that, unlike other video gaming cartoons where the world is generally fine and the villain would simply be trying to conquer it only to fail time and time again, in SatAM the world, or at least a small part of it, has been visibly conquered, and our heroes have to put up with an enormous amount of trials, from going through an extreme amount of effort to get one single light bulb to turn on, having to deal with losing friends or loved ones to either roboticization or an unfortunate death, and more makes this show actually rather compelling. Now, normally stuff like this can be very easy to cock up and have it sound unbelievably pretentious and cheap, but it works a lot of the time because the show, for all its worth and despite its problems, is actually pretty well written. The characters have personalities that stand out in some manner. There are a heck of a lot of good jokes that keep things from being too depressing.
Come on, Sal. With my looks and your brains, we're unstoppable.
You're partly right.
Which part?
Guess.
The incredible good looks part, right?
You're dreaming again.
That is not a dream. That is one hedgehog hunk.
And there are even a few moments that I felt were actually very moving, even to the brink of tears at one point, and I'll let you guess what that certain moment was. With a lot of care and effort put into it, well-written characters, jokes and moments, a very good veteran voice cast, and animation that's actually pretty good, Sonic the Hedgehog SatAM is more than deserving of its huge cult following. Honestly, there'd have to be a lot of problems for something as good as this to go horribly wrong.
Oh, you're so tense. Loosen up.
Stop it, you massive fuel!
Yeah, come on.
Oh, crap. Before we get on to the problems of the show, allow me to make this as clear as day. Despite the praises I sang about the series in the first several minutes, I actually have an intense dislike for Sonic SatAM. And no, it's not because the praise from across the internet has ruined it for me like it has countless other things. And no, it's not because it hasn't held up very well since the 90s, though that's a small part. No. The reason I immensely dislike SatAM is because several things that it does drive me absolutely mental. This is probably going to be my most subjective review yet, as a lot of these issues annoy me because of my taste in regards to what makes a good show, but more to the point, what makes a good story. Otherwise, what's the point of being here? These are problems brought up by many people, but due to my storytelling taste, they annoy me all the more. It should say something about this show when this video was originally going to be a list of all the problems I had with the series, though I figured that a review might be a bit more helpful and interesting overall. There are honestly way too many things about Sonic SatAM that I felt were done wrong, so for the sake of not wasting your time or mine, I'm only going to address the biggest flaws in detail and then do cliff notes on the other flaws. Firstly, for a show that's often praised for being dark, mature, and serious, Sonic SatAM's tone is more inconsistent than your typical shonen anime. Some episodes have a balance of the Freedom Fighter's idealism and the general setting's realistic outlook with some nicely done subtle moments, and then you have episodes that feel completely out of place and just completely wreck the tone of the series altogether. The first season can be excused on the fact that there wasn't really a consistent writing team set in place and the trope depending on the writer reigned supreme, but what about the second season? There were only about 3 people writing that entire season, yet it had a hell of a lot more tone fail, especially by introducing pointless, hilarious quote-unquote characters like Dulcie, and having 2 comedic shorts episodes midway through that felt less like stories that added to the atmosphere of the show, and more like rejected plots to Super Mario Bros. Super Show. Seriously, look up the plot summaries of these episodes and try to convince me that they wouldn't feel more at home in that show. Now, I'm not saying it has to be completely serious. I mean, some of my favorite shows whiplash from hilarious to utterly tear-jerking every so often, but those work because they're written in a manner so that it feels consistent and believable. With SatAM, the constant mood shifts just make the show feel incredibly uneven in its tone. Seriously, it's just really distracting to have a show where on one side, you have only a few young people acting as the planet's saviors, robotization being acknowledged of being fully aware of what you're doing but unable to do anything about it, and having lots of trouble turning on a single light bulb, and then on the other side you have characters going up into a space satellite version of Mos Eisley with odd robots and a giant bullet bill, a dragon that constantly crashes into everything, and Antoine getting stalked by a robotic furry bride of Frankenstein. And no, really, that is actually a thing. Getting away from the inconsistent tone, let's talk about a very major problem. The characters, starting with their villain. Considering how many people praise Dr. Robotnik up the wazoo for being an awesome villain, he has to be the most generic, dull, and just plain boring incarnation of the Eggman character I've ever seen in official media. Aside from the Jim Cummings voice, there is actually nothing memorable or interesting about Robotnik whatsoever. In fact, if you remove the voice, no one would remember the guy, and if you want proof, Look no further than Sonic Underground, which did just that with its villain, and now no one remembers him anymore. My big problem with Dr. Robotnik in this show is that he is nothing but scary, cold, and intimidating. And that's a really big issue because then you're just left with an incredibly one-dimensional character that is only saved by the graces of time due to excellent voice acting. To prove what I'm on about, think about characters that you think are really awesome, from TV to animation to video gaming and beyond. Why do you think they're awesome? It's because we see several sides to them. We see them at their best, we see them at their worst, we see them at their silliest. When you do this, you make a great chance of making a character that people can really side with, even if they are evil, and that when you do give them an awesome moment, it makes them all the better for it. In contrast, having a boring villain who's always one personality trait, regardless of what that trait is, isn't going to win any fans, and just makes him seem like wasted potential. Today, my favorite incarnation of Robotnik has to be the one from the Archie comics penned by Ian Flynn, who I think really gets how to make the Eggman character scary, because he balances the scariness with the silliness. Most of the time, Archie Eggman acts in a very silly manner, constantly quoting internet memes, having a bromance with Dr. Wily, and generally seeming as if he's enjoying every single second of being evil. However, there's still that underlying scariness, which means that eventually he's going to snap. And when he does snap, when he gets truly angry or diabolical, it's genuinely terrifying because of the aforementioned silliness. It makes him a really unpredictable villain because you're laughing your ass off at his antics one minute, and then soiling yourself in fear the next when he becomes a threatening force to be reckoned with. And as the Joker himself has proven, an unpredictable villain with quite a bit of mental instability is much more terrifying than a predictable one-note villain. The only time we see Robotnik in a state that isn't anger, coldness, or what have you, is at the very end of this series when it sounds like he's going utterly insane. But by then, it's far too late for the good doctor. Oh, but it's not just the villain that's got problems. The heroes arguably have it much worse, come to think of it. Now, let me make it clear that Dulcie aside, I actually quite like the Freedom Fighters. I think they're pretty distinct, interesting characters, even if Sully could have been a bit less one-man resistance force in the second season. The big problem here, however, is how the characters are utilized, something that, to be quite frank, pisses me off to no end. I'm under the belief that when you have a sizable cast of characters, you should do your best to give them all equal screen time for character development, stories, and such. Or at the very least, make sure each and every one of them contribute an equal amount to the plot unless dictated otherwise. And this is a very, very big problem with the series overall. Going by just the main Freedom Fighters, you've got 6 characters with distinct personalities that can be used to bounce off each other in different ways, develop their personalities, and to tell interesting stories, either by themselves or with others. However, the big issue is that more than half of the cast is practically ignored in favor of basically turning SatAM into the Sonic and Sally show. Antoine and Tails get about 1 episode each in the entire series where they do something that contributes to the plot. Rotor helps develop a few MacGuffins once, maybe twice throughout the series, and Bunny is barely used, if ever, for anything that isn't opening particularly tough doors. Not that this wouldn't bother me so much if the writers felt they could do a lot of character development and storytelling with Sonic and Sally, but they don't. Time and time again, we just see the two of them constantly bickering about battle strategies, whether to be slow and strategic or reckless but spontaneous, and maybe 1 or 2 other things over and over and over again. Seriously, if you're not going to do anything interesting with these 2 characters, then for crap's sake, just focus on other people then. It gets even worse in the second season when Dulcie shows up and starts hogging almost as much screen time as the furry Dharm and Greg couple, despite the fact that she's unanimously considered an annoying character, and Antoine also starts getting a lot of screen time, which he spends the philanderized dirty coward that causes no end of trouble for our heroes and contributes feck all to the proceedings. It constantly drives me mental that instead of looking into other characters and maybe their backstories, we just get the same arguments between the newlyweds as if the writers are trying to distract us from the blatantly obvious fact that these two will eventually be in each other's pants by the time the curtains go down. Oy. And now that we've covered wasted characters done and dusted, let's tackle something similar, and I swear this will be the last thing I cover in depth. Wasted time. For a 26-episode series, Sonic SatAM spends a surprisingly large chunk of that running time spinning its wheels, giving us episodes that don't really contribute anything to the show's overall plot, episodes that, as mentioned before, are very much at odds with the show's tone, or what it's supposed to be anyways, or at worst, total waste of time and effort. I've got no problem with fillers, don't get me wrong, as long as you spend that time developing the characters and the overall world. But again, that ship's pretty much sunk in favor of the Sonic and Sally bickering hour. Out of curiosity, I actually went back and checked how many episodes of the show were actually needed, for things like plot, actual development from other characters and such, and I found that only about 12 episodes really did matter in the grand scheme of things. That's just barely half of the show's running time properly utilized for something. And for those of you that'll say there were more episodes in planning, something I'll get onto more in a minute, and so they just left some things for later, I can understand that to an extent, but here's the thing. 26 episodes, as far as I can see, is more than enough time to tell your grand story, defeat Robotnik, unroboticize the innocents, and take Mobius back. There have been plenty of shows that have done far more with their time in 26 episodes, or even less than SatAM, and that, in my eyes, is just plain unacceptable. Phew! That's a lot of complaining. To not waste your time or mine, I'll just do cliff notes on the rest, since we could really be here all year if I went through each and every one of them. Dulcie, as I mentioned, is a pointless, unfunny character who clashes horribly with the show's tone, not to mention that she literally appears right out of nowhere at the start of the second season, despite never being there before. Those two comedy shorts episodes can frankly go to hell as far as I'm concerned. Yes, I know they were ordered by the show's network ABC, but even I could have written better shorts that would have at least developed some of the characters to an extent. The Blast of the Past two-parter is a total waste of time that accomplishes absolutely nothing except for saving a random character who, by the way, we never actually see in the rest of the series. There are way too many things that should have been answered over the 2 seasons that are never ever addressed, and the Doomsday Project is a disappointing finale filled with Deus Ex Machina, rushed character development, a climax with more batshit insane ending than Evangelion, and a cliffhanger that really should have been left out. There, I'm done. Finally. Now before I wrap up this insanely long review, allow me to divulge into a small but well-known part of Sonic SatAM's production history. Near the end of the second season's production, the writing team figured there would be a third season picked up by ABC, and so they went to work on leaving a few loose ends that would have been tied up. However, due to a combination of problems such as low ratings that came from airing at the same time as Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, frequent conflict between Sega of America and the writers, and a general lack of interest from ABC's new higher-ups, SatAM was cancelled after its 26th episode, ending on a cliffhanger that frustrates fans to this very day. There weren't any scripts or storyboards produced for the third season as far as I'm aware, only several ideas suggested by Season 2's head writer Ben Hurst, most of which I talked about in the Sonic SatAM Season 3 mystery video I did a little over 2 years ago. Over the years, Hurst had tried on several occasions to get a continuation of SatAM off the ground, even planning to do a movie if worst came to worst. Sadly though, each and every time the man was simply told no, and with his unfortunate death due to complications from diabetes in August 2010, it seems that unless Sega proceeds to reboot the whole series, that Sonic SatAM will forever remain on that unfortunate cliffhanger. I bring this up because, given the suggested plot threads involving backstories of characters like Robotnik and even Sally's computer Nicole being revealed, making Tails a much more important character and elaborating on that cliffhanger, this third season probably would have addressed some of my criticisms, and it does explain why others exist in some manner. Though again, wasting so much time in the first place is inexcusable as far as I'm concerned. Now, despite my very intense dislike of the series, let me make this abundantly clear. Sonic the Hedgehog SatAM is actually a good series. The animation is pretty solid, the voice cast is very good, it goes above and beyond the Call of Duty for video game cartoons, most of its writing is well done and sometimes really good. I really do think the show is good, and I have no end of respect of what the writers tried to do for its cult following. However, I think the reason I hate SatAM to begin with is because it's good. Something that's just bad in and of itself mostly elicits either apathy or giggling from the audience because it really can't waste the little potential it had to begin with. It's when something's actually good, when something has the potential to be really good or even amazing, and it ends up squandering that opportunity. That's what truly drives me insane about SatAM. All the wasted characters and time and inconsistent tone, a dull villain, pointless episodes and time wasters, and unanswered questions just end up really damaging what is, at heart, a good series. Sonic the Hedgehog SatAM is the best animated adaptation of the Sonic franchise yet, though given the quality of everything else, that's not really saying much. If you're a fan of Sonic the Hedgehog or wondering what all the fuss is about, please check out SatAM. Just keep your expectations low, just in case. Sonic the Hedgehog SatAM is available from Cookie Jar Factory. There was a DVD box set by Shop Factory released back in 2007, but is currently out of print, though thankfully the whole series is available on YouTube and Netflix for all to see. Not official material, but still worth mentioning is Season 3, a webcomic made by the Fans United for SatAM fansite that tries to continue the story of the cartoon based on the suggested plot threads while expanding on canon in its own way. I haven't read much further past the first 20 or so pages, and even then that was over a year ago, so there's probably more pages of it released by now, but I did find it quite enjoyable, heck even more so than the actual series. So if you like SatAM, you might want to check out Season 3 for all it's worth. Reconciling my objective opinion that the show was good and my subjective dislike of it, I give Sonic the Hedgehog SatAM a rating of decent, a surprisingly enjoyable work that fans of its franchise and genre should definitely check out, though keep in mind that it's still heavily flawed. Finally, I finished this bloody review. Man, I gotta go do something simple to wind down from this for the next video. Until I figure out what that'll be, I'm off. This is Father Dougal 9000 saying, until we meet again next time, have a great day, y'all.
Blue streak speeds by. Sonic the Hedgehog, too fast for the naked eye. Sonic the Hedgehog, Sonic, he can really move. Sonic, he's got an attitude. Sonic, he's the fastest thing alive. Look out when he storms through. Sonic the Hedgehog, don't doubt what he can do. Sonic the Hedgehog, Sonic, he can really move. Sonic, he's got an attitude. Sonic, he's the fastest thing alive. He's the fastest thing alive. He's the fastest thing alive. Blue streak speeds by. Sonic the Hedgehog,